Hey guys, it's Drew again. The year was 1888. Future Hall of Famer and baseball superstar Tris Speaker was born. One of the most favorite and famous baseball poems of all time, Casey at the Bat, was published for the very first time. And a small confectionery company in Ohio, known for their unusual marketing, decided to take some colored lithographs of baseball players and add it in to sell their gum, making the very first baseball gum cards ever created. But that part of the story wasn't discovered until over 135 years later, but it's definitely worth investigating. So let's check it out. In 1974, Rob Leifson, the future founder of REA Auctions, was helping doing research on the Sports Collector's Bible, where they were trying to categorize or catalog all the different sets and known sets of sports collectibles, cards, and things like that. And there was one set that was kind of stumping him, and it's known as the 1888 Scraps Tobacco set. But it's kind of a misnomer because outside of the year 1888, there's nothing scraps or tobacco about it. Now, let me explain. So they knew that the set was from 1888. See, these cards were beautiful lithographs, and there was a total of 18 cards in the set. There was 9 players from the Detroit Wolverines and 9 players from the St. Louis Browns. The reason they knew it was 1888 was these two teams faced up in basically the version of the World Series in 1887. The set actually has a few future Hall of Famers in it, guys like Ned Hanlon and Sam Thompson. In fact, there's a very early playing days card of future White Sox owner Charles Comiskey. But anyway, so back to the name. So Leifson was a little confused on what this was called. So he called up a man who was kind of a known old timer in the hobby, a Dr. Lawrence Kurzog, and he was a contemporary of Jefferson Burdick and knew a ton of stuff about old cards and things like that. And he said, "Hey, what is it about this set? What can you tell me?" And his response was, well, it was kind of flippant. He said, "Well, those are scraps." And what Leifson took that as was a company name, as in SCRAPPS, Scraps, assuming that it was a tobacco set because all the cards made back then were produced by tobacco companies. So it ended up going in the Sports Collector Bible and finally the standard catalog as the 1888 Scraps Tobacco. But this was not what he meant. What he meant was those are scrap cards. What scraps were, it was a term that was used way back then where companies would make colorful photos or different things, and they were typically die cut, just like these cards, and they were used for kids because a big fun thing to do was make scrapbooks. So they weren't scraps as in scraps a company, they were scraps as in stuff for a scrapbook. But that's where the confusion started, and that's the way it was listed, and it was listed all that way, and just assumed as time and decades went on, people just figured 1888 Scraps Tobacco. That was, of course, until 2014, where Love of the Game founder Al Crisafulli had a couple of cards that were consigned to him to sell, including a few sets of these scraps. The difference was these were still conjoined. See, these cards themselves were die cut, and they were meant to be separated and then were put one piece into a package to be sold with the confectionery at the time. But what it was is he had a pair, or actually a couple of pair that were still conjoined with an adjacent piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, very clearly written, was the letters HDS and Company. So this got Al to start thinking, what does this stand for? I mean, it's supposed to be Scraps Tobacco. That's what everybody knew it as at that point. But HDS and Company, so he started to investigate. What companies were around that could be called HDS and Company back in 1888? And he looked and he did some research and he found a few different ones from all over the country. He found a textile plant down in Virginia. He found a tool maker up in Connecticut, but he did find a confectionery out in Ohio. And that's where he started to investigate. And what he found was he started looking in that little area, and he, sure enough, found that HDNS Company was a confectionery company that made all sorts of gums and candies, as well as some other things like fireworks. Kind of an odd combination, but they did make fireworks. That these cards were produced to be put in with packages of gum. That makes this the very first gum cards ever created. Now, there's a little bit of debate because there was another company that possibly that year had gum, but by very little, these were the first color cards ever produced, if you want to really get technical. But the point is it wasn't just that this investigation happened. It happened over 135 years after these cards were produced. Nobody knew for not only decades, but well over a century that these cards were actually produced for candy and gum, not for tobacco. And I think it's kind of interesting that that discoveries like this can still be made, and it kind of makes me really yearn to want to be able to find stuff like this. So what I found out is I love this story. I mean, this story has everything to it. It's a gum card. It's Hall of Famers. It's got mystery. It's got intrigue to it. They're beautiful cards. And I'd like to announce, in case you didn't already know, I did pick up my very first one. When I found out about this set and I found out the backstory, I knew I had to have one. Now, as you can see, it's die cut, so it's kind of hard to see. So I'll hold up a piece of paper behind it so you can see how beautiful the colors are. Now, this is not a Hall of Famer. This is what you would call a common, but even commons can be fairly expensive. They're blank backed, but it's just a beautiful set. It's got a great story, and I'm so thrilled to be able to have this. This is a card I've wanted for months and months. When I first found out about the story, I'm so glad to have picked it up. I know a lot of people that talk about their baseball card collection, and they talk about they want to be able to have their collection tell the story of baseball cards. If that's the case, I can't wait to find out which HD&S company card you pick up, because you cannot tell any story without the beginning, and this is the origin story of gum cards. As always, I appreciate you guys coming along. Thank you for listening, and until next time, you guys be good.